from Surat An-Nisaa. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَنْ يُهَاجِرْ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ يَجِدْ فِي الْأَرْضِ مُرَاغَمًا كَثِيرًا وَسَعًا. Whoever migrates for the cause of Allah will find many safe places and resources throughout the earth. Now, we were talking about migrating for the purpose of Allah. Migrating for the cause of Allah means that you're not able to practice your religion of Islam properly. So, when you migrate, you'll be able to practice Islam fully. And again, the historical context is referring to a specific group of people. Who is that specific group of people? Can anybody tell me? Hussein. Huh? Muhajirun. Who went from Mecca to Medina, correct. Who are the ones who didn't go? So who is it encouraging to actually migrate? Muhajirun are the ones who already left. So who is Allah encouraging that they need to leave too? The what? Which ones? Muslims or non-Muslims? The Muslims, right. That's the people among Quraysh or in Mecca who became Muslim. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling them, you guys need to leave too, because you're not safe in Mecca and you can't practice your Islam fully. You're going to make too many compromises. So now, after saying that, Allah says, whoever does migrate for the cause of Allah, you're going to find a lot of safe places. You're going to find a lot of resources that you need throughout the earth. Like, Mecca is not the only city that has like everything you need in the entire world. So anyone who's in any situation, they always think like, you know what, I can't live in anywhere else. You know, if you live in Orange County, you're like, live in Irvine. You're like, Irvine is just so nice. If something really, really bad happens here, and you're like, there's nowhere else I could live except the city of Irvine. You know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that, you know what, if the situation gets really, really bad over here, you're going to find other safe places to go. You're going to find other resources in other locations. This is not the only place in the world that you must remain there. But what happens is psychologically people trick themselves and they think, I can't live anywhere but here. This is the only place for me. No, it's not. So Allah is reminding them that they can leave Makkah. وَمَنْ يَخْرُجْ مِنْ بَيْتِهِ مُهَاجِرًا إِلَى اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ ثُمَّ يُدْرِكْهُ الْمَوْتُ فَقَدْ وَقَعَ أَجْرُهُ عَلَى اللَّهِ. Whoever leaves their home and dies while migrating for Allah and His Messenger, their reward is already guaranteed with Allah. So basically it says, some people are also, the first part of the verse addressed the fear of prosperity. I won't have resources. It may not be safe. It might be this, it might be that. The second part addresses mostly the fear that, you know what happens if I'm on the way and I get attacked, or what if it's not safe, or what if something happens to me? I'm so safe nicely inside of a city, I'm scared to leave. So it addresses that fear. And it says anyone who does migrate and they leave their home and they die before they reach their destination. What was their destination? Where were they headed? Medina. Very good. While migrating for Allah and His Messenger, the reward is guaranteed. They're going to get the reward. They haven't even arrived at their destination yet. They still get the reward for starting the journey, or even for making the real, genuine intention. Out of the mercy of Allah, He's going to grant them full reward. وَكَانَ اللَّهُ غَفُورًا رَحِيمًا. Allah is forgiving and merciful. Allah is forgiving, meaning He'll overlook the past. What was the problem with these people in the past? What did they do wrong? What did they do wrong? Okay. Which people are we talking about? They wanted to stay in Mecca and they were supposed to migrate. They're saying, at least now when you migrate, Allah will forgive you for not migrating earlier. Rahima. And Allah is merciful. He's going to reward even small steps that you make towards doing good. So that is that section. Next section, verse 101. وَإِذَا ضَرَبْتُمْ فِي الْأَرْضِ فَلَيْسَ عَلَيْكُمْ جُنَاحٌ أَن تَقْصُرُوا مِنَ الصَّلَاةِ. When you travel through the land, there's no problem, typo, there is no problem if you, another typo, shorten the prayer. So Allah is talking about shortening prayers when you travel. So whenever you're traveling throughout the land somewhere, there's nothing wrong if you shorten the prayer. Now, shortening the prayer is referring to you shorten your prayer by half. So Isha becomes 2 rak'ahs, and Asr becomes 2 rak'ahs, Zuhr becomes 2 rak'ahs, Fajr becomes 1 rak'ah, and Maghrib becomes 1.5. Is that right? No, that's right. I want to make sure everyone's awake. Those of you who are on your phones, you're missing out. So put your phones down. So Maghrib is not going to be shortened. Why not? Because I'm going to take hands now. Why? It's 3 rak'ahs. So if you shorten it, you get 1.5. If you half it, you get 1.5. That's not going to work. What about Fajr? Why not shorten Fajr? Yes, you know? I can't hear you. No, just speak louder. They took away and half it, it'd be like nothing. It'd be like 1 rak'ah. So 1 rak'ah is like nothing. Okay. It's better than nothing, but close, yeah. You just like, we got like one guy's like amplifying the sound here, and one guy's like ricocheting off to somebody else's question. This is interesting audience. Okay, alhamdulillah. Yes, go ahead. Yes. Okay. Okay. That's pretty good. So that's pretty good. So it's already shortened already. It's pretty short already. And when you pray any nafil prayer, any extra prayer, the minimum is usually 2. You pray by 2s. Witr is the exception, but the witr, the 1, is connected to 2 other ones, the shafa. So this is why there would be less than the minimum prayer that we generally have. So they skipped Fajr for that reason, and they skipped Maghrib for that reason. So 3 of the prayers get shortened. In khiftum an yaftinakum alladhina kafaru, if you fear danger from the disbelievers. Now here's the key. These two, this is all one verse. So Allah is saying that when you're traveling through the land, you're allowed to shorten your prayers if you fear danger from the disbelievers. The disbelievers, meaning the ones who are at war with you, not the ones who give you the death stare at Irvine Spectrum and you're scared that they might look at you again. You're like, I must shorten my prayer because Irvine Spectrum is a very dangerous place to pray. I know some Muslims, they feel Irvine Spectrum is very dangerous. So just be careful about that. We're not talking about that. Now, the if is the problem. Many Muslim scholars have looked at this. If we took the word in Arabic and we translate it as if, then it would mean that you can only shorten your prayer if there's danger or if you have real danger. So if you're sitting in your hotel room, assuming that there's no danger inside of your fancy hotel room that you're in, you don't meet the criteria to shorten your prayers according to this verse. So what the scholars explained is they said, well, the Prophet ﷺ, through his own words and through his own actions and teaching, he used to shorten the prayers when he was traveling. And that's an explanation that this verse, the if, means especially if, but not limited and restricted to only that category. And that's why it's extremely important to follow the sunnah and to know what the sunnah is. Otherwise, you'll misunderstand the Quran. You won't be able to apply it correctly. So if somebody says, you know what, I don't accept hadith and I don't accept the sunnah, I only follow the Quran, then when they travel, they can't shorten any of their prayers unless they're in actual danger from the disbelievers at war, because they don't have the sunnah to clarify any of this for them. So that's important to understand as well. إِنَّ الْكَافِرِينَ كَانُوا لَكُمْ عَدُوًّا مُبِينًا. The disbelievers are your sworn enemies. Right? Let's talk about the ones who are at war with you. So a few things we need to reflect upon here. Number one, we talked about shortening your prayer, which prayers are going to be shortened. Number two, notice that it doesn't mention anything about combining prayers. So in the Quran, some people have this notion that shortening prayers and combining prayers are exactly in the same category, and you always do both, or you don't do any at all. That's not the case. There's nothing about combining prayers when traveling in the Quran. This is something that's mentioned in the Sunnah, and we'll leave that topic for another day. But we're going to focus here on just shortening the prayer when you're traveling. So what's the definition of when you're traveling? So the scholars have looked at this, and I get this question all the time, so I'm going to address it. Scholars looked at this and they said, what is the distance of travel? So how long do you have to travel for in order for you to be considered in the category where you're allowed to shorten your prayers? So if you travel from your Belinda to Irvine, can you start shortening your prayers? It's not very far. You wouldn't call that a journey. And how many miles is that? Like 15 miles, 20 miles, something like that, right? So that definitely would not qualify. If you travel from Orange County to Tokyo, Japan, would that be far enough and long enough to shorten your prayers? Yes. It's a long journey crossing the Pacific Ocean. So we got something where you clearly cannot shorten your prayers because it's too short, and something where you clearly can shorten your prayers because it's a very long distance. Now the challenge becomes, if you look at what Muslim scholars have said throughout history, what they did was, many of them said, you need to travel about 50 or 60 miles of modern, miles didn't exist back then, but they had different measurements. So you say if you travel about 50 or 60 miles, then it's far enough for you to shorten your prayers. Did the Quran mention the length of the journey? No. Did the Prophet ﷺ mention the distance of the journey in terms of miles or kilometers or any type of units of measurement? No, he didn't mention that. So where did the scholars come up with these numbers? They came up with the numbers. They said, well, what's the average journey that people used to take? Well, what did they used to ride? They used to ride a camel. And if they would ride a camel, sometimes they would be riding the camel, sometimes they'd be walking the camel. Do they ride 24 hours a day? No. They got to stop. They got to set up their tent. They got to sleep at night. They got to rest. They don't just keep going. The camel doesn't have autopilot, semi-autopilot, but it's not comfortable sleeping while it just, you have to direct it. So they calculated, if you're traveling by camel and you're doing a little walking in a caravan and you're doing a little bit of riding, and you're doing this and you're doing that, how far do you get in a distance of 3 days or in a distance of 1 day when you travel? So they made this approximate calculation and they came up with a number and they said it's approximately this, farsakhs, right? Which was converted into kilometers and converted into miles later on. This is where it comes from. But there's one more important element. And I know I'm getting a little bit technical here, so I'm trying to simplify this and move on. There's one more element is, did the speed of travel, was it ever taken into consideration? If you travel by a camel and if you travel by a horse, is there a difference in the distance you're going to get? Huge distance, huge difference in the distance that you're going to be traveling. That's why the Pony Express, was this, probably some of you studied this in school, that they were able to get messages from one place to another place super fast, right? So, and it's a ride in non-spray form. It's pretty fast, pretty cool. You've been on the ride? MashaAllah, it's a nice ride. Anyways, they're not paying me to do advertising, but it is a cool ride. So, the animal matters. Did the scholars take land animals into consideration? No, not so much. Why? Because nobody really travels 50 miles straight on horse and just keeps on going on a journey. Journeys were always taken by camels. But there was one other means of transportation during the time of the Sahaba, during the time of the Prophet, peace be upon him, that was much faster than a camel, and it was realistic. And they recalculated the speed and the distance that a journey would be considered. Does anyone know what that mode of transportation is? No, I just said it's not horse. Yes, Yasmin. A donkey, no, donkey is not going to get you anywhere. You don't want to travel on a donkey for 100 miles. Bad idea. Huh? A ship, exactly, a ship. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran that He made the ships to sail on the seas with very little effort required. The wind is going to carry it along, and it's going to move way faster than a camel is going to move through the sand in the desert. Did the Muslim scholars in the past take into consideration the ship? They absolutely did. They absolutely did. And sadly, there's not too much research about this in the English language. Today, we have cars. And today, we have airplanes. And should the speed of the vehicle be taken into consideration when calculating the minimum distance? It absolutely should. So people who take the fatwa from the books that were translated in like the 1970s and 1980s, and they say 50 miles, and they drive to work 55 miles, which is quite common. You go from Irvine to downtown LA, you're like at, I don't know, 50 something miles. Every single day, you're going to be shortening your prayers. And that's why, even though this opinion of 50 miles approximately is an opinion that a lot of scholars have mentioned. They mentioned it in the pre-modern period, before the invention of faster means of transportation. And if I'm losing people right now, I'm about to conclude this discussion. The discussion conclusion is that Sheikh Ibn Taymiyyah and other scholars, they had a different definition. And their definition appeals to me personally. I lean towards this opinion. Sheikh Yasir Qadi also leans towards this opinion, and that is, travel is defined by what people consider a journey to be. So if you go to San Francisco, that's a journey. If you commute to downtown LA, that's not considered traveling or being on a journey, because you do that every single day.
How about San Diego?
Somewhere in between. Exactly. Good question, Jabber. All right, so that's the conclusion on that. Let's move to the next verse. We got to finish this. وَإِذَا كُنْتَ فِيهِمْ فَأَقَمْتَ لَهُمُ الصَّلَاةَ فَلْتَقُمْ طَائِفَةٌ مِّنْهُمْ مَعَكَ وَلْيَأْخُذُوا أَسْلِحَتَهُمْ. When you, it's talking about to the Prophet, when you are with them, meaning in a battle, and you lead them in prayer, then let one group of them pray with you while they're armed. Okay, armed means with their weapons. So now this verse, remember the previous verse was talking about war. And it was talking about shortening prayers in the context of war, but you can also do it outside of warfare. Now it's talking about how do you pray when you're in the middle of a battle in a war. There's a specific way to pray. So it says that when someone is leading the prayer, one group is going to pray and they're going to be armed. So in the past, what kind of weapons did they use? Swords, bows and arrows, shields, very good, and one more. Dagger, yeah, part of swords. And what else? What? Spears, very good. So these things. So they're saying basically the Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, when you pray, if these are your stuff that you have, keep it all on. You keep your armor on, you keep your sword in the sheath, you keep your bow around your neck, wherever you carry it, you got your lance or whatever it is, you keep all of that stuff with you when you're going to be praying in the middle of a battle. فإذا سجدوا فليكونوا من ورائكم ولتأت طائفة أخرى لم يصلوا فليصلوا معك وليأخذوا حذرهم وأسلحتهم. When they prostrate themselves, when you prostrate yourself, you can't see in front of you. You can't see where the enemy is. So you're in a state of weakness. When they prostrate themselves, let the other group stand guard behind them. So you're supposed to be in two groups. Half the army is going to be praying in the front row. And then there's going to be a second row. Other half the army is going to be standing guard behind them. So they're not praying. They haven't started their prayer yet. Only the first line, imagine a huge line because there's no walls and much. You're out in the battlefield. A huge line of soldiers, or you could make two or three. All of them in one line. When they go into sajda, behind them is a second line of people. Are they armed or not armed? Of course they're armed. Because if the first people who are in the middle of prayer are armed, people behind them, they have to be armed without even praying. So they go into sajda, and the other ones stand. They haven't even started their prayer yet. So they're going to stand guard behind them. Then the group that is not yet prayed, which is the second one, they're going to join you in prayer. So after they finish one rak'ah in the front, they're going to join you in prayer. And they must be on guard and they must be armed as well. Now there's some differences of opinion in the schools of thought of how this is done. I'm just going to mention, since I'm hybrid Hanafi, I'll mention the Hanafi way of doing this. So the way that this is going to be done is once they complete one rak'ah of prayer in the front, the second group, the second line that was standing up hadn't started, they're going to move forward and the other group is going to walk backwards. And they're going to start their salah. And the other one is going to remain standing there while the other one is in sajda as well and completing the prayer. So half the army is standing and on guard while the other one is going to be doing the prayer and going into sajda and doing everything. So now this is really important because keep in mind, they're in the middle of war and they're still going into sajda. Sometimes people take sajda very lightly. They're like, I think I'm just going to sit in a chair. I'm just going to do like the little this one. These are people, yeah, exactly, Jabir. Right? So if you are lazy about it and you don't have a genuine excuse and you're like, yeah, I got a little paper cut on my leg. I don't know how that would happen. But anyways, and then you're like, because of that, I think I'm going to sit in a chair and pray and I'm just going to do the little sajda motion. These are in the middle of war. They're going all the way down into prostration. So this is something that we should take very seriously. It's not something that we should take lightly. Okay? So, of course, if you have a genuine excuse, you should pray in a chair. You shouldn't hurt yourself. And you shouldn't be suffering. But sometimes people take it a little bit too lightly. We should take this stuff very seriously. وَدَّ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا لَوْ تَغْفُلُونَ عَنْ أَسْلِحَتِكُمْ وَأَمْتِعَتِكُمْ فَيَمِيلُونَ عَلَيْكُمْ مَيْلَةً وَاحِدَةً. The disbelievers want to see you neglect your weapons and your stuff, your supplies, your belongings, so they can launch a sweeping attack on you. So they don't want you to, they want you, what do the disbelievers want? What are the people who are at war with you, what do they wish? They hope that, mashallah, they hope that you people are so pious, quote unquote, that you all join together in prayer and you all go into sajda at the same time. That's a perfect moment to launch an attack. Don't follow this mentality of, they'll have mercy on us because they'll respect the institution of prayer, whoever we're praying to, they'll be so respectful that they wouldn't dare to attack us because that would be dishonorable. How many people have enough honor to care about those type of things? Not that many. The temptation comes. We talked about the temptation before. So Allah is saying, always be cautious. وَلَا جُنَاحَ عَلَيْكُمْ إِن كَانَ بِكُمْ أَذًى مِّن مَطَرٍ أَوْ كُنْتُم مَّرْضَىٰ أَن تَضَعُوا أَسْلِحَتَكُمْ. There's no blame if you put aside your weapons when you're overcome by heavy rain or by illness. So basically it's saying, well, Allah just said in the previous verse, if you're at war, make sure you have your weapons on. That's a commandment. You should be having your weapons. But what if it's difficult for you to keep your weapons on? Like if it's really heavy rain, or if you're sick or something like that, you have a valid excuse. So Allah's mentioning now, there are valid excuses that will exempt you from being put in this situation. وَخُذُوا حِذْرَكُمْ, but be cautious. The general principle, even if you take the excuse and you don't wear the weapons, you have to always be on guard. It's a very important lesson Allah is highlighting. Don't just trust people. You don't trust your enemy. Right? Your enemy is your enemy. They want to destroy you. Be cautious and don't be naive. That's the rule. The rule in Islam, sometimes people think, if you're a spiritual person, if you're a religious person, you should be extremely trusting. No, you should be wise too. You should be a good person. You should be honest. You can generally trust the average person, but you should always be careful when there's an actual genuine danger. إِنَّ اللَّهَ أَعَدَّ لِلْكَافِرِينَ عَذَابًا مُهِينًا. Allah has prepared a humiliating punishment for the disbelievers. Because talking about these people have no honor. They would attack you when you're down in the middle of prostration in sajda. So be smart and be careful. So this is the way prayer is done, even in the state of war. Now I want you to think about something for a moment. 2 points I want to make here. Number one, if in the middle of a battle you do not skip prayer in the middle of a battle, can you make an excuse and say, I got busy at work and therefore I skipped the prayer and I just came home and prayed later on? I got busy at school. There was a quiz at school. And I just got so busy, I just skipped the prayer and I came home and I prayed later. I hear this a lot, right? And, it's understandable that everyone misses prayer sometimes. But we shouldn't make an excuse out of it and justify it and say, I had a good excuse. What was your good excuse? I got really busy at work. It's not a good excuse. Because if you have to pray in a state of war, when you have two lines and both of you are armed and one of them is switching the other, and this is a verse in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put this verse, long verse, to clarify that this is how important prayer is, then excuses like the other ones are much weaker. They're really not that valid. We should take that very seriously. The second point is that if somebody is praying, if we're supposed to be cautious like this, you should also be cautious in other situations. Maybe not as much as war. If you're praying in an airport and you have your suitcases there, what's the best location for your suitcases? Behind you, to the right of you, to the left of you, or to the front of you? What's the best location and why? Why? Yeah.
In front of you, because you can watch it, and if anyone comes by, it doesn't tell us if they've come.
Very good. So in front of you is the best for two reasons. One is that you can watch your suitcases. Everyone's going to try and take your bag or something like that. And if you put a barrier in front of you for prayer, so that's the ideal. Some people, they pray in the airport and they put their bags behind them, and then in the back of their mind they're thinking, what if somebody takes my bag? Why would you put it behind you then? Right? So you should be smart. You should be wise. So and if someone does take your bag, it's kind of your fault because you should have been more careful. وَخُذُوا هِذْرَكُمْ. Be careful. Take precaution. Now, in the sad event, and this happens at school too. This is more at school. Airport, people are going to get in pretty big trouble because there's cameras all over the place, right? In school, in university, a lot of university students, this happens to people in high schools and stuff. High school, middle school, kids are mean. Some kids can be very mean. So what are they going to do? If you're praying and you put your backpack, let's say, behind you, you're not thinking about it and it's not in front of you. And all of a sudden you pray and you're trying to focus and you finish your prayer and someone took your backpack. Someone opened your backpack and took out candy from your bag. Kids can be really mean. Can you imagine them doing this? Absolutely. Happened to me when I was in middle school, right? Caught the guy like right at the end of the thing. But anyways, this happens. People will come. I remember when I was in middle school, old days, used to have backpack on. In the lunch line, people would come and try and secretly unzip your backpack, take something from it, sneak something in there. That's why most of my crew, we used to wear our backpacks on one strap. Not because we're trying to look cool, because we're taking our hizr, trying to protect ourselves so that we can see from over our shoulder if someone's going to be taking stuff from our backpacks. Now, a little skeptical, but you know what? That happens. So when we're cautious at school, put your backpack in front of you. Put your stuff in front of you so that it doesn't get taken. But if someone comes along, even if you took your precaution, and they grab your backpack and they're running away, and imagine, this is happening now with these anti-Zionism protests and people who are fighting back, Israeli students, whoever it may be. There's a lot of hatred out there. So people grab something from you, and you're in the middle of prayer, Say somebody grabs your backpack and they start running away. What should you do? So I hear one person says, keep on praying. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will, you're probably going to say, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will return it back to you because you dedicated yourself to Allah. Is that the reason? Okay. Okay. Anyone else? Oh, okay. Cheryl Auntie says, grab your backpack. If you're close enough, you can grab it. But are you allowed to move like that in prayer? You absolutely are. You absolutely are. So if there's a danger, you absolutely are allowed to reach forward, grab your backpack. Now the person grabs it and you can't reach it in time and he starts running away. What do you do? It's recommended to break your prayer and go get your backpack.
Wow. So that's more important than Allah and the
Ooh.
Quran?
Jabir, I thought you had taken my fiqh class last year because we covered it in detail. And I'm pretty sure you were there. Check your notes. So, yes, if your cake is burning in the oven, right? Is it better to burn your house down or resume your prayer? Don't say yes. I know. Burn your house down for Allah. It's like hijrah for Allah. And even if it's not complete, your reward is guaranteed, like Allah said in the hijrah, right? If you get killed, your reward is guaranteed. No, this is not the same situation. Because it was a preventable situation. So no, you don't do that. You break your prayer and you stop it. Now, if it's something small, something very minuscule, right? Like they take like a dollar or something, then continue your prayer. But if something valuable, you absolutely can break your prayer and go after the person, inshallah. So we'll stop there for this week, and we'll continue with 103 next week. Well, let's load the Kahoot. Is it ready? Let's load it, and I'll take questions while we're loading, inshallah. Yes.
For Ayah 101, it said Wahida. That's why it's saying Wahida.
Maylatan wahida. That's the one. 101 or 102? Right here. Maylatan wahida in 102. This right here. Wahida, one swoop. So they're gonna attack you in one swoop. Yeah. I cannot hear what you're saying. Okay. I still can't hear what you're saying, because other people are talking and it's still a little bit difficult to hear you. So if everyone could either quiet down, and Muhammad, can you amplify for him, please? Can you tell me what he's saying? I can't hear you either. So the amplifier can't hear you either. I'm not that old. Like my ears are not that bad. Something is not right in this audience here. You do not shorten the sunnah prayers. You only shorten the fard prayers. The question was, can you shorten the sunnah prayers? No, you only shorten the fard prayers. Okay. Yasmin, you have a question? As long as you pray on time, it's okay that you pray at home. If it's at school, and if you're not going to make it on time, then you have to pray at school. Yeah. Okay. Absolutely. As long as it's safe, it can be in a public area. There's nothing wrong with praying in a public area. I prayed right next to Pony Express many times. Yes. If you're home, you're not traveling anymore. You cannot shorten that prayer because you're home. If you're home, you're not traveling. So you only shorten if you're traveling. Okay, ready to launch? Ready to start? Okay, anyone else? 10 seconds. Oh, yeah. You mean in the past? You mean today? It could be, yes. It could be. So let's say somebody, like I knew a guy who commuted to work 80 miles every single day. Somebody else, they don't ever do that, but then they're going on a journey and they're staying overnight. Yes, it could be. Yeah. Okay, let's launch. Bismillah. Someone should read. You want to read, Omar? Go ahead. Here.
How many players out of 5 can you shorten if you're traveling? Question. How do you pray if you're in battle with no? Question. Are you allowed to carry weapons when you pray?
Huh? Qawlu. 11th. Who are the three? Bob. Who's Bob?
Who's Bob?
You guys Bob? MashaAllah.
Afternoon.